I did a 7-day screen fast. So no laptop, no phone, no TV. So my laptop and phone get locked into my roommate's safe. I finished all my schoolwork a week in advance, like found the perfect time to be able to do 7 weeks or 7 days, like no technology, no screens. So if the TV was on in the living room, I just like go back into my room and just like read a book or something or go exercise. Um, and I didn't really know what was going to come out of that. I just knew I wanted to sort of take a break from media and all this information that was just like constantly coming at me digitally. And I think my big takeaway after that was how much I love being around people. Uh, I think technology is great in so many ways. It was actually a little frustrating that I wasn't able to use my phone to contact somebody to either speak to them or go hang out with them in person. Uh, I was on the street and I thought it was weird because I was walking to class and I had to ask this guy. I was like, "Hey, like, what time is it?" And I was like, "Well, like the last time I ever had to do that was probably like 10 years ago before like or even longer before I had a phone."
So we got you on the phone, man. How's it going?
It's going great. I'm on my third week in North Carolina. Just moved to Charlotte, so I've really liked it so far. And I start my job July 6th, so
Oh, okay,
just
so you
been
haven't been
getting
working
settled
yet?
in. No, I haven't. I wanted to make sure to have enough time to get up here, explore the city, meet people, get settled
Yeah,
in.
for sure. How you liking it so far?
I really do like it. I was really surprised to find out how many young people live in my area. So I thought leaving college would be so different, but I'm still around people my age. Weather's been great. I was afraid I was going to have to move somewhere cold like Minneapolis, and I don't handle the cold too well, but it's been awesome here. Um, Looking forward to hopefully gyms reopening soon if everything goes to plan.
Yeah, it's been weird, like a little over 3 months now since I've been in the gym. And I'm sure for you as well, but then working out at home, but it's just super weird. Like, I know I was on a trip in Florida, Tampa. Like,
Mm,
I got home March 10th, I think. And then it was I think a Friday or a Saturday. I did some bowling practice because like I don't know if you've seen that. I got like back into bowling now that I've like taken some
yeah, I
time
saw
off of
that a little
riding.
bit.
But I did some practice Sunday night for Monday's league, and then Monday the league canceled like maybe 2 hours prior, and then the next day the stay-at-home orders kicked in, and it was just like, all right, cool. Let's see how long this goes. And I was embracing the 30-day like stay-at-home orders and the
Yeah.
quarantine that we're trying to call it. And then it's just been 3 months now, and like it's like, man, like we've been doing workouts at home, but as you know, it's nothing, nothing
It
like the same.
Oh yeah, it gets repetitive. It's almost like a different sport altogether when you're working with resistance versus body weight. For me, it was when it first happened in Florida, everything closed. I was in Gainesville at school, and our gym went to before everything shut down. Our gym actually had a line, and they were only letting 50 people
Mm.
in at a time. And then a week after that, they closed the school gym. So actually, right when that happened, my fraternity realized that the semester was over and they had some leftover money. So they decided to buy a bunch of gym equipment. So we had a bench press, a squat rack, and a bunch of weights in the backyard. So luckily, I was able to work with that for a while. And then the gyms reopened in Florida for about a week, but then I moved up to North Carolina. So it's back to waiting again.
Yeah, I think we got like another week or two of this phase. I've been trying to keep up with it, but so I think we're in phase two here in North Carolina, and then phase three is like the end of the month, and that's when like the bowling alleys open, the gyms, and I want to say they
Mhm.
also said movie theaters.
Okay. I think that's what I've heard. I think they're planning for June 26th,
Yep.
which would be this coming Friday. But the governor, I think like last week, said no promises, cases got worse, but the announcement should at least come Friday.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at like our kettlebells our friend lent us. We have an 8 pound, a 15 pound, and a 23 or 25 pound kettlebell. And then
Yeah.
we ended up buying an Indo board just to like
Mm.
add something. But also, I was still going through my keto mastery course to become a keto specialist. And I just watching lectures at home is so distracting. So I was like, if I can get an Indo board, then like I'm locked in. And so it was
Yeah.
like we use that a little bit, but just doing like I don't even know what fraction that is of what I normally have on my body in terms of weight. It's just really like I don't know, like challenging is a good word because
Hmm.
it's almost like oh, like this isn't doing that much, but I know it kind of is. But and like I know for you, like that's what I want to talk to you about. It's like your perspective because well first the last time we hung out I believe I slept on your couch and gave a talk
Yep.
at the retail conference as well as the leadership class that you were hosting. Is that correct? That's the last time we hung out.
Yeah, it was, which I want to say was,
It's like last year.
yeah, I want to say it was last spring.
Yeah.
So it would have been spring 2019.
Hmm. Yeah, and while I was there, we were like kind of nerding out about like human nutrition and biology, things like that. But something that I found really fascinating about you, particularly, and why I wanted to talk to you, obviously we're friends and stuff. I wanted to see how you're doing, but I was just really finding it
Yeah.
fascinating the mindset that you have around bodybuilding and competitive eating and how those like align. And I just wanted to also get some updates because I know for a minute you were posting like YouTube videos every now and then of these like ridiculous challenges that you were doing, but you were also competing. And from what I remember, doing fairly well. But then also you had all these regimens to like prepare that I just never thought of that kind of were counterintuitive to what I thought. And so, yeah, two things like, how has that been? And then how is this whole, stay at home quarantine, like pandemic affected that, if at all?
Yeah. Man, there's so many talking points there. So, um, I think when we were last talking, it was last spring. And so I had three major things going on in terms of my interest. And so uh, the first were the two that you mentioned. So bodybuilding, I've been doing resistance training and focusing on muscle growth and learning how to work with different body fat percentages and really just following a bodybuilding style plan for now about 6 to 7 years. So I'm usually in the gym about 6 to 7 times a week. And then at the same time, I was doing competitive eating, which we can dive into a little bit more. And then the third piece was I was training for my first marathon.
Oh,
And
that's
so
right.
that
Yep.
was all last spring. And so
That's
I
a
think
lot
the way I
going
was
on.
describing it, yeah, right. And the way I was describing it is I want to say I had the marathon running, which meant that I was burning a lot of calories because I was running upwards of 30 to 40 miles a week sometimes. And then also more exercise with bodybuilding and strength training in the gym, which burns some calories but uses a lot of energy. And then I was doing competitive eating challenges. Usually at that point, it was probably about one a month. Uh, but I would train for these challenges to expand my stomach. So that required a lot of caloric input. Uh, but after everything, they all sort of just balanced each other out. So it was like working really hard in three different places just to almost end back neutral in the way that like I had a lean physique. I was probably around 10% body fat, a lot of muscle. And as I was running all these miles for the marathon, oftentimes people will lose weight. A lot of times bodybuilders, especially bro science bodybuilders, are they're afraid to do cardio because they don't want to lose weight. But with the competitive eating piece and the cardio and the bodybuilding, it just all neutralized. So I actually, throughout my 5 months of marathon training, I stayed around the same body fat and gained about 2 to 3 pounds. And so it all stayed pretty even. But that's what that looked like. And I'm happy to dive into any of those other topics a bit more.
Yeah. So if I am doing math correctly, you're about like 15, 16 when you started resistance training, like like fully into it because you're
Yeah, so
21 now.
I'm 21. I turn 22 next month. And so resistance training was the end of my sophomore year of high school. And I distinctly remember that and so that would put me I graduated when I was 17. So yeah, at the end of being 15, end of sophomore year of high school. And that was the distinct point because I actually started going 7 days a week for 2 to 2.5 hours. And I don't think within my first 6 months, I think I might have missed 2 days in the gym. And I didn't eat a sweet or anything I'd say enjoyable for 6 months. I got obsessed. And then I've learned more about balance and the fact that I can eat a lot of things I want sometimes. But yeah, 15 is when I really got into it.
So what sparked that? Like, were you coming from an athletic background, or like, because I know for me when I was in high school, I stopped playing school sports probably like, I think Little League was like when I was all in, and then I stopped that, but I was still playing basketball a little bit until my freshman year. And then sophomore year, I believe I didn't make the team. And then I was also progressing with BMX. But throughout my whole 3 years of high school, I always got hit up by my friends on the football team to come and train with them because they were like, with BMX bike riding, my quads were developing at a younger age,
Mm,
probably more than the average student. My
yeah.
forearms for sure, just from, hanging on. And they'd always make jokes about my forearms, be like, dude, come lift with us. And to me, that was just such a bizarre thing because I didn't consider myself an athlete because of the perspective that BMX and action sports had back then. And now it's changing, of course. But I was always like put off to it. And then I dabbled when I moved to Greenville, North Carolina, because I was surrounded by the pros that were like, you got Dave Mira, who's like a legit athlete, looks at everything like an athlete. He's training, he's got this and that, he's got a gym in his house. And the other guys that are older. And I was like, well, if they're doing that, then maybe there's something to it. So I'd go to like Gold's Gym every now and then. I go swimming, like all these things. But it
Mm,
wasn't until I blew out my knee in 2013 when I was like, oh, all right, so I got to rehab this. And then I started noticing benefits to my riding. And then that's what that kind of just stuck because I was seeing the progress on my bike. And I was like, oh, it's not just, being a jock. It's not just getting bulky, which, the main fear that's super ignorant is like, you're going to bulk up if you train. And it's like, well, no. Um,
yeah.
and so that's how I got involved. But did you have like, were you just like, oh, I saw like a video or someone bodybuilding or resistance training that looked cool? Or did you like have an injury or were you an athlete that got into it?
Mm. So it started with baseball. I played baseball my whole life. And by the time I moved to Florida, I had played baseball and tennis, and those were my two main sports. And that was in Atlanta. Then when I was 12 years old, I moved to Florida. And baseball is a big commitment in Florida when you're playing because there's no off season. It doesn't get cold enough to take an off season. So I remember my sophomore year of high school, I actually played 200 baseball games that year, which was insane. And at the time, I really thought that my best shot to get into a good academic school, perhaps something like an Ivy League school, because I was very academically driven, was to be good enough at baseball to hopefully get some sort of scholarship for a school. But my goal was to go to the best school possible. And so I started working out because I just heard from coaches and people, hey, working out will help with baseball. And then also my dad, he had been into working out more so on the powerlifting side back when he was in college. But he was able to help me get into the gym a little bit. But it wasn't until my friend, Brandon McKnight, first friend I met in Tampa, who was super into the gym. He had an Instagram page called Muscle McKnight and always like sort of played that gym, like douchey bro science character. And we started working out in our neighborhood gym. And I remember he put me through a workout where I it was so intense that when I went home, I could barely brush my teeth after. And there's something weird that I loved about that feeling is that I worked really hard and it's something that's going to help me with sports. And you just get that immediate feedback that, you from the effort that you put in, that something good is happening. So that's really where it started. And I thought, working out would get me really good at baseball. And turns out they don't really correlate perfectly in terms of bodybuilding style working out doesn't correlate perfectly with baseball performance. Now there are great ways to work out with resistance for baseball players, but for me, I fell in love with the idea of putting on muscle and putting on weight because I was always skinny growing up. That was my identity. Like the end of sophomore year of high school, when I started getting into the gym, I was 125 pounds and really, really skinny. By the end of senior year of high school, I was 175 pounds. So I gained 50 pounds just from working out and was still lean too. But I was obsessed. I was very obsessed with it. And I think what it was not necessarily just putting on the muscle and looking better, but just the progress, the feedback, that's what really did it for me. And I think you know as well, and most people that are into fitness, the mental benefits are sometimes even greater than the physical benefits. And my days are always better if I get a good workout in. And I think that's why I've always stuck with it.
Yeah, I've never talked to someone that was like, man, I don't feel like going to the gym, went to the gym, did their workout or did whatever exercise it was, and it was like, I regret that. Like, I don't think I've
Exactly.
ever, and I've never felt
Yeah.
that. I've always felt better after. And it's interesting what you said, like, because you had these different focuses and they weren't really congruent. Like baseball, putting on a lot of muscle probably isn't the
Mhm.
best, decision depending on what position you're playing. So
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
that's interesting because when I started going to a sports performance gym here in North Carolina, I got paired with a strength and conditioning coach, and he wasn't like, "Here's my program. You're going to train like all my other athletes." We obviously had a consultation, and it was his idea, I believe, to come to the bike park and to film a lot of my main movements, a lot of my main ramps, the style of which I'm going to be moving my body, the tricks, all these things, and then put together a plan. Because similarly, if I just bulked up with a ton of muscle, it probably would have made, agility a lot more difficult on my bike, and being heavier on a bike probably isn't the best idea. So there's a lot of different things that contribute to my strength and endurance on my bike. And that's what led me moving forward. And um, interestingly enough about him, his name is Matt. He just moved to Tampa last year, I believe. He got a position with the not the Major League Baseball team, but the team right below, like
Is
I
it
guess
the Clearwater Threshers,
no,
Tampa Yankees, but
it's
one of the minor league teams
I
in
believe so. If not the actual major team, because what are they? The Blue Jays,
Tampa Bay Rays.
Tampa Bay
Now
Rays.
the Blue Jays have a minor league team in Dunedin called the
Okay,
Dunedin Blue
I'm
Jays,
not
which
sure. I
is
have to
near
double.
Tampa.
Okay, I'll have to double check because he lives right outside of Tampa. I forget which town, but
Okay.
yeah, he got a pretty cool spot, and I think it is the minor league or the not the main major league team, because he said one of the dudes got drafted to the Yankees, so it was pretty cool for him. But that's where he ended
Okay.
up, and he's just someone who would come to the bike park, and like we do heart rate testing to see neurologically to physiologically my heart rate was going up because of tricks, and then how to correspond that to training and recovery. It was really cool, and I got really nerded out into it, and I just loved it.
Yeah.
And now that I'm not competing, I love exercising just to stay healthy. Like you said, mental benefits as well as physical. Um, where did competitive eating come along? Like, how did that come into the picture? Because that seems so far. You've mentioned that it's like it worked out, but it seems so far left in terms of like
Right.
going for physical fitness, physical health, and then let's do competitive eating.
Right. And that's what, like, everybody's main question is like, how do you get into it and why? And so I think it really started when I was getting into fitness. Whenever I do something, I think it's just my personality. I want to learn as much as I can about it and do it the most effective, efficient way. And so I really got into YouTube. I've learned almost everything, I think, from YouTube. And within the fitness industry on YouTube, several years back, there's this popular challenge that was going around called the 10,000 calorie challenge. And so I'll get to that in 1 minute. But I guess the point was for me to gain all that weight, that 50 pounds in high school, I needed to eat in a caloric surplus. And that's just mathematically how you gain weight. For me, since I was on the tennis team, the baseball team, and I was working out 2 hours a day, and then if I had any other free time, I was playing basketball with my friends. I was burning so many calories and being young and having more and more muscle that I was eating about 4,500 to 5,000 calories a day just to try to gain weight. And I was so strict about it and obsessed with fitness that I would not allow myself to eat junk foods to get there. So now I'm eating a bunch of clean foods that are satiating, like vegetables and potatoes and lean proteins, that in order to get to the calories, that became way harder than working out. Eating all that food was the hardest part. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., eat 3 servings of oatmeal with a bunch of raisins in it, and then I'd have 5 eggs with some ham in there and a banana, and then promptly fall asleep in my first period class every day. But to get back to it, because I was eating so much, and then on YouTube, I saw people trying this 10,000 calorie challenge. What that meant was in in the time you're awake for the day, you have to try to eat 10,000 calories, and liquid calories don't count. and obviously you can't throw up the food or otherwise you lose. And I was like, well, that seems interesting. I'd love to try that at some point. So fortunately, I have some friends that are dumb enough to try it with me. I did the challenge, was able to complete that. Then fast forward to college, one of my friends, Jake, who was on the UF rugby team, he played O line at my high school, and he's been as heavy as 300 pounds, and right now he's about 220. And so he's a very big dude, and he found this challenge in Gainesville at a restaurant where it was a 2 foot, 6 pound burrito. And if you could finish it in under 30 minutes, you'd get the meal for free, a t-shirt, your picture on the wall of fame, and a gift card. So we show up to do it, and I finished in 20 minutes. One of my other friends, Austin, finished in 29 minutes and 30 seconds, and Jake set the record and finished in 7 minutes. So
Damn.
after we finished that, we're like, okay, we're pretty good at this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was doing an internship in Atlanta. There was a challenge on the TV show Man vs. Food, where it was a 30-inch, 11-pound pizza, and you and a teammate get to attempt it. Well, Jake and I tried that. We became the 15th team out of 3,000 attempts to ever finish. Man vs. Food couldn't even finish. And that was the point where we're like, okay, this is fun. Everyone in the restaurant was having a blast watching. All my friends just thought it was the most interesting thing in the world. And it was very, very, very difficult. And I think that's what got me excited, is it was finally something that was posing a new challenge to my fitness. I think that's part of the reason why I did it. Not to sound arrogant, but I had been doing bodybuilding for so long that it wasn't hard for me to maintain a lean physique with a lot of muscle. And so having the ability to do competitive eating and still find a way to maintain a lean physique posed a new challenge to me. I found a way to do it. And I think when I help people learn about fitness, it actually conveys the topic of you can find different ways of balance. You can eat foods you like. You have to do the right things most of the time. Use me as an example. I can eat 10 pounds of food in one day, but still be lean a week later. And I think that helps me sort of teach people what it's like to manipulate your body fat, weight gain, weight loss. And that's kind of what's kept me in it.
Yeah, and you mentioned something really important that people miss. Like, what comes to mind is discipline equals freedom, like that famous quote. You were
Yeah.
so adamant about your regimen and eating clean, and you were young, you built a lot of muscle, so your ability to metabolize food at a higher rate was much more than, let's say, a 40-year-old who doesn't work out, who has a larger percent of body fat, insulin sensitivity super low, and they're not that active,
Mm.
So you create a lot of discipline to be able to have that. And I think that that's what comes to mind when I hear the word balance. Like, I begin to cringe when people say balance now, because to me, you can't measure that, but you can if you were to look at, what you did to get to that point. So with a lot of my clients, it's like, all right, you got to get rid of the mindset that this is forever, because you're not going to do this forever. But to get to that point where you have that freedom to have cake and not store 20 pounds or even look at it, for some people with super low
Right.
insulin sensitivity, you got to do some things that you may not be comfortable doing, but create that discipline, because it's going to create more freedom after. And that's just what comes to mind when you just said that, because you did something for 6-7 years before you started really indulging. And you
Mm.
were also filming YouTube videos. Are you still doing that with your challenges?
So I'm currently not. The last one I filmed was in February.
Which one was that?
That was the one where I was using my competitive eating ability to raise a bunch of money for cancer research. And so what that looked like was, on my Instagram story, I said, for every dollar I raise today, or in 24 hours, I guess I'll have to back up. So this Instagram post, I sort of created a menu, let's say. And so if you were to donate $1 toward this foundation, then I would have to eat one chicken nugget. And I told everybody I would try to eat this all in one day. So if you donated me $1 to this foundation for cancer research, it'd be one chicken nugget for Chick-fil-A. If you donated 3, it'd be a donut from Krispy Kreme. $5 was a taco from Taco Bell. $10 was McDouble from McDonald's. $20 was one pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And then $50, I would have to eat an entire rotisserie chicken. and $100 was an entire birthday cake. And so that was my creative way to try to raise money for this foundation. And it served as a menu, because if you wanted to donate me $10, you could also tell me, of that $10, I want it to be 3 donuts and 1 chicken nugget. Well,
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. And, it really caught people's attention, because I've always said with competitive eating, people are at minimum interested or disgusted, but that still kind of means they're interested. They're at least curious. And so people found it super interesting. They're like, if I donate, I can watch this crazy video that he's going to post on YouTube. So within 24 hours, I had a follower base of about 1,000 people. And in 24 hours, I raised $520, which was far more than I expected. And so the math came out to about 19,800 calories, over 1,000 grams or over a kilogram of fat was within that. I think it was over 500 grams of sugar. But that's what the nutrients look like if I were to have completed the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went and filmed this and tried it, I tried to eat this all in one day. And I ended up eating about 13,000 calories within 24 hours. And it was one of the more painful 24 hours of my life. But, very difficult, tried to work through it. And roughly I ate about 45 chicken nuggets, 18 donuts. I think it was 16 or 18 tacos, 3 pints of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, like 1 or 2 McDoubles, and like just a nibble of the chicken and the birthday cake.
Did you have a photo of all that laid out?
So not all at once, just because of like sort of wanting the temperatures of the foods to be a certain way and
be somewhat enjoyable.
Right. Yeah, so it's just kind of all compiled in the video. You just see it throughout the day. And the videos, I really liked making them. It was fun, and my people would comment all the time. I thought it was really funny when I was just walking around Gainesville and some guy sitting outside at a restaurant was like, "Hey, you're that eater guy from YouTube, right?" And I was like, "Whoa, okay, that's weird. I guess that's what it's like, a small little taste
You made it.
of what real celebrities have." Yeah, but I just haven't done a challenge since February. So every challenge I have posted to YouTube. And over the summer, I did 4 or 5 challenges, and that's when I finally started posting the YouTube videos. And I love YouTube as a platform. In fact, I want to get into posting more YouTube videos soon, but I don't know if they're going to relate to competitive eating or not. I have been considering retirement from competitive eating, but maybe I'll do like a challenge here and there, but it's a pretty exhausting thing to try to keep up with.
Yeah, I can imagine it'd be taxing on the body. But what's interesting too, that now you just said that, is like, what is the mindset going into it? Because it's not going to be enjoyable. Like there's got to be a calorie threshold where you're just like, I know when I get to 5,000 calories, whatever it may be that you've grown to, it's like, this is going to be a painful job. Like, how do you prepare for that? Or do you even think about it?
You have to prepare mentally. It's after doing all these challenges, the only challenge I ever failed, which was the day before Thanksgiving 2 years ago, was the only challenge I've ever failed. And that was at the time the worst pain I've been in my entire life. And to put this out there, I've actually never thrown up from competitive eating, which is probably also a big mindset thing. For me, throwing up's not good, and you have to deal with stomach acid, but also for the sake of the sport, you're consistently trying to stretch out your stomach, and your body has to get used to digesting the food. Well, if you throw up, you kind of lost everything you just trained for. And I've always told people, if I was throwing up after challenges, I wouldn't do it. At that point, I think it's a bit dangerous. You could potentially develop eating disorders. It's just not a good thing to be doing. So between the challenge I failed, it was a 12-egg chili cheese omelet with chili cheese and veggies inside and on top, and then about 2.5 to 3 pounds of really dry home fries, and then 2 different 1-pound biscuits that were super dry. So just to get like one of the biscuits down, I had to drink probably a pound worth of water. And I finished the omelet, and we had an hour to do the challenge. I finished the omelet in 3 minutes. And then it was just the dry carbs for the rest. And it was brutal because I'd use so much water and ketchup to get it down. I ended up having one biscuit left that I just couldn't finish. But with all the water and all the food, I probably had somewhere between 10 and 13 pounds within my stomach, larger than newborn babies. And the picture does make it look like I was pregnant with triplets. Uh, but I mean, I held it down in that hour immediately after. And the act of holding it down was me closing my eyes and just not thinking and breathing and making sure I was holding it down. But I tell that story because, back to your question of how do you prepare? Well, that was one of the worst pains of my life, one of the most challenging things. Yet somehow I was crazy enough to keep doing more and more challenges after, knowing that it could be like that. And it made me realize, okay, well, the harder I train and the better I train, the more time I train, then I won't have to feel like that because I'll have the capacity to accomplish the challenge and not have to get to that feeling. So that sort of served as motivation. But I think the line I use is, once the timer starts, there is a level of adrenaline, like any sport. And I'm not arguing that competitive eating is a sport, but it certainly feels like it in the moment. And yeah, once the timer starts, I like to say that I turn my brain off. And it's, I think, like a lot of athletes, you just let your practice show. You sort of get into this athletic mode and things just happen. Now, the reason is there's no such thing as pacing yourself in competitive eating. It's just not how the human body works. In fact, the longer you wait, you're just going to feel more full.
Mm.
So if you wait an extra 10 minutes, you don't just have more room. So you have to go as fast as you can at the start. So really for those first like 10 minutes, you are just eyes closed, just going after it, trying to hopefully finish like 80% of the challenge. And then the mental battle starts, finishing that last 10 to 20% of food. And you cannot think about throwing up. You cannot think about failing, because once you do, once you let that slip mentally, you probably will fail. And that's what it takes. And I think learning that mindset of just zoning in and on one thing of winning, not thinking about the option of failing and just going forward and, just being super deliberate about that. I think you can apply, oddly enough, to a lot of areas in life. If it's sports, athletics, working on something important. So I think that's what I've enjoyed about it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's one of my favorite things to talk about, and that's what I think the number one thing I learned from BMX is just how to shift my focus. Because when you shift your focus, is where you shift your energy, and you can
Mm.
apply that to any aspect of life. And I think the only reason you mentioned like the competitive eating may not be as familiar to like sports or whatever, it's just like 'cause it's new, but it's still a
Mm.
challenge. And
Mm.
there was an interview Joe Rogan had a while ago. He was talking about creating your own struggle. And so if you create these moments of struggle, whether that's going to the gym for someone that's competitive eating, it's falling and getting up and trying again, you're going
Mm.
to be stronger later on for things that you didn't purposely put in your life. And that's, I think, a fundamental piece of life that you've figured out from bodybuilding, competitive eating. I figured out from BMX. And I think if people really took that perspective and found things to challenge themselves with the understanding, it's going to lead to something more later on, then I think we'd have probably a happier world, maybe a more successful
Definitely.
in every aspect of life, world. And to that point, is that what drove you through competitive eating, was like the challenge and the gratification that would come later on, like this delayed gratification?
100%. I think that's such a great way to put it. And I kind of want to write that down so I can, what those words that you said, so I can explain it to people. Because otherwise, I try to explain it and it's kind of like, oh, okay, you're just crazy. But when you break it down that way, it's perfect. It really is, because whenever you accomplish something that's difficult, I think that's when you really feel good about it. If you're completing a 6-piece puzzle, you're not going to feel accomplished about it. But if you have a 1,000-piece puzzle that took you hours and hours and is really tough, you feel great afterwards. And so I think one of the words that I use to describe myself, at least in the top three, is competitive. I just love competing, having something that's challenging and having that, gratification afterward, even though it's delayed and you have to work really hard for it. I think that's why something like a marathon was appealing to me too, even though now that was the most painful day of my life. But I feel great about it. It's one of my proudest accomplishments. So it is that. It's anything that you have to work really hard for and yourself tomorrow or a week from now or a year from now or 10 years from now will look back and say, I'm glad I did that. I look back at the marathon, at the competitive eating, everything I've done with fitness, and those are the things I'm most glad I've done.
Yeah, and I think that's like the delayed gratification idea. It's like, especially in today's society, especially the younger generation, like everything's instant. Like we literally don't
Yeah.
need to leave our couch and could have everything we could want or need delivered to us. Groceries, services, like whatever you want.
Hmm.
But if you're doing things that are challenging, you have this, I think it builds this mental fortitude moving forward. And that's part of my story. And, now reflecting in those painful moments, you're not going to think like, oh, I know this is going to be good for me later on. Because, the pain is so severe. You're just like, oh, this sucks, whether it's
Hmm.
mental or physical. So how does that play a role in your journey through college and then into business and retail sales and then to the position you're at today? Like, did those things, I mean, I feel like they obviously would, that's what you're going to say, but like, did
Hmm.
those things help play a role in that? And like why that route in school? Like, was that something that you found interesting in, or did you just pick something one day and you're like, oh, I actually am interested as you went in?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, yes, absolutely. I think the gym and bodybuilding has been the biggest metaphor for my life in general and anything that I have drive toward. That was like the distinct moment in my life when I got really into fitness that everything changed for me mentally. Now, I'll sort of jump back and talk about school and business and academics, why that was important to me. I grew up, I want to say like the most, it just felt like a very, not even standard, but plain, childhood. I was super lucky. It was middle class and no problems. I'm so fortunate from that. A family with parents that are together. Uh, never having to worry about money in a bad way. It was just like a very simple and easy life. I was very grateful and privileged to be able to just, not have to deal with huge struggles. But growing up, I know one of the first things uh, that I knew about myself was money was sort of like something that I found fascinating, just because of what it can do. So I remember my mom would always drive me. I had to be in the car when she would drive my sister to gymnastics, and I would always be looking at like gas prices because I remember being like shocked when it took $50 to fill up my mom's minivan. I was like, Mom, that could be a video game that I could play for a year. Like it just blew my mind. So then and then I was really into like TV shows like Shark Tank, and that's like where my initial interest for business came, which is eventually what I studied in college. But when I had that flip in high school, it was the end of my sophomore year. That's when I really did zone in on academics. My parents always made sure that academics were important, but they always sort of had to say, "Hey, you need to study," and they would tell me academics are important. When I started getting into the gym and at the end of my sophomore year of high school, they never once had to ask me to study again. They never once had to ask me to do anything because I knew that it was important to me. I sort of had this obsessive and naive formula in my head at that same time where it was, okay, I'm going to get the best grades as possible as I can in high school because that'll get me into the best possible college, which will then get me the best possible job, which will then make me the most money, and then I'll be the happiest person ever, which was obviously totally flawed. That's how my mind worked in high school. I think I did grow up uh, in areas and around people that were very materialistic, and money seemed like the objective at the time. And that was it. Nobody really was talking about internal satisfaction or things like that. I just thought salary was everything. I remember being in high school trying to decide my major and looking up which majors average the highest salary. Um, but that's how it was. And then the luckiest thing happened to me ever where, so I graduated high school because my junior year of high school, that's when I flipped the switch. I was into fitness. And so because I was really disciplined with that, I got really disciplined with school. I took 4 college courses that year. And I remember my baseball coach telling me, you cannot take 4 college courses. You will do bad. You're not able to do it. And someone telling me I'm not able to do something is probably the best thing ever. So I promptly proceeded to get straight A's the next year in the 4 college classes. And then I graduated the top 10 of my high school out of 513 students. And I thought for sure I was going to get into these awesome schools. So I applied to 13 schools, saw myself going out of state for sure. And then I only got into 2, actually 3. Uh, but ended up going to the University of Florida. So I stayed in state, ended up getting a full scholarship. So I didn't have to pay $100,000 of tuition at a different school. My tuition was free. Um, and yeah, like academics were so important to me. And then around college is when I started realizing, okay, I want to do business. And then I was looking into these jobs called investment banking because I was a finance major when I started. And in investment banking, you work around 100 hours a week, up to 120 for your first 2 years, but you make over 6 figures when you first start. And I was like, yeah, I can sacrifice 2 years. And then it got to the point where I listened to these investment bankers come in and give presentations. And people would ask them what the best part of the job is. And they said, well, it's the fact that in 2 years you get to go work a different job. Like that's deconstructed what they were saying. And, oh, what's your day to day look like? Well, I'll be in the office till 2 and I'll wake up and get back in the office at 7. And there's something that struck me that I realized if I did that job and I made all that money, I wouldn't actually have time to work out. And that was my deal breaker. I said, no, like if I can't pursue that hobby that has helped me with everything in life, then I won't do it. So, man, I know this is a long answer, but then switching to marketing was a really important move within business for me because I was looking down the finance route. I did a finance internship that I did not enjoy. I always tell people my favorite part of my internship was lunch because I got to talk to people. And so I then took an internship in sales and ended up loving it. You're interacting with people all the time, and you're the one that gets to make these big decisions. And so for my job with Proctor and Gamble, I get to sell in new products or new strategies to these retailers, which then ultimately means that if I sell like Tide laundry detergent to Target and have it positioned to where the consumers now see a promotion for it and they buy that instead and they're really happy with how their clothes smell. But I feel like I made that difference in someone's life, even if it's small. But I'm always getting to interact with people. And that's what became really important for me. And that's sort of how I ended up in the sales route. I know that's a long-winded answer, so we could pick up a more specific part, but
No, it's
that's
perfect.
the overall, yeah.
So it was April 2018
Mhm.
that I came to UF to speak to that class, which was my first time ever speaking. And it's so funny to think like where I am now with my confidence in speaking. And I was just so like insecure about it. And I guess I still did an okay enough job to, resonate with some people, but what, what were you going, like, where were you in that transition at that point? Because you graduated, what, like a year and a half later?
Yeah. So when you came to talk to, this was Betsy's retail class, right? The
Mm.
first time I heard you speak, and I know it was like one of your first presentations. At the time, I didn't know, and I wouldn't have guessed. But
It was my
I
first
was,
presentation, actually. The day before,
yeah.
I did like a little at Jackie's school here, Durham Academy. They had
Mhm,
like this, I forget what they called it, but you'd come in, you speak about something you're passionate about, like this day. So
mhm,
they invited me to come speak about whatever, and I used that as practice. So that
yeah.
was technically, it was my second time presenting ever, but I just thought that was super funny. That's where I met you, met Elena, like met a couple awesome friends of mine there. But yeah,
Yeah.
back to the question, like where were you in that transition being in that
So
class?
this was during my sophomore year when you came to speak in that class. And the right after that speech, a few months after, is when I did that finance internship that I hated. But I think your speech helped a lot because, man, I remember you coming in and um, that class, in my opinion, a lot of the speakers didn't excite me. And then you came in and like after like the first 2 slides, I was like, oh hell yeah, like I'm excited. Like whip out my notebook, I'm just ready to take notes. And I love like when I get like actionable advice. And so you like there was a few things on there I remember writing down, and I took my notes, and you said when there was a lunch afterward and I got to ask you some questions, I was at this stage where I was so focused on productivity and like doing as much as I can and setting myself up for the best possible future and maybe considering entrepreneurship with one of my friends. And you came and talked about how you sort of started your own business and how you're making money on your own, living your own life, doing something you're passionate about. And I remember I was doing this experiment at this time where I said, I probably don't need to sleep 8 hours. I set a 6 hour timer every time I went to bed. So if I went to bed at midnight, I'd wake up at 6. If I went to bed at 10, I'd wake up at 4 a.m. But I was like, I don't need to sleep more than 6 hours because I feel like there's not enough hours in the day to do everything I want to do. And I remember when we went to that lunch, one of the questions I asked you, I was like, so what's like your relationship with sleep? And, what do you think about it? Because everybody told me I was crazy for that. And I remember you gave some answer along the lines of, I prioritize sleep. I think it's important. But if there's a day that you're doing something really important and you don't get as much sleep, well, like sometimes that happens when, you're running your own business or something along those lines. But that's where I was at. And I took these notes, and I know a big message of your speech was do something you're passionate about, something you care about. And during that internship, like within the first few weeks, I realized I wasn't passionate about it. I did not care about it. And I think I was reading back through my notes, and there was a time where after you came and spoke at UF, you posted a picture on your Instagram of you when you spoke there. And I was just like, I'm going to drop a comment. And I just commented and said, hey, like, I really appreciate you giving that speech. I still look back at my notes sometimes to get inspiration. And you commented back and said, that's awesome. If you ever want to talk, shoot me a message. And I was like, whoa, like he replied to me and he's got a blue check mark on Instagram and all that stuff. And I was kind of surprised that you replied. And then it was in that internship where we had that first call, where I remember I called you with my friend Austin, and we were kind of talking about like different things we cared about. And that's when I like realized I was like, okay, like I need to find something that I really like doing. But yeah, when you first gave that speech, it was before that poor internship experience. But I think there's a chance if I hadn't have heard that, I might have been more complacent and went back to that same company after.
That's amazing. I believe you shared something similar to that in the past, but not along those lines. And I appreciate you sharing that, because that's the main reason why I share and why I want to have these conversations and why I'm writing and like all these things, is because I learned along the way and the hard way that we can make like a living doing something we're passionate about, and it can be more than we ever thought. And that's the truth I'm living today. But had I not been encouraged by my family to go after, what I wanted, because I showed them I was able to put the work ethic in, all these things and stay out of trouble, I don't know where I'd be today. And I'd probably be living this mediocre life, doing the normal day in, day out. And so I'm really
Mm,
stoked that that resonated with you, because that's the bulk of why I share what I share. I mean, there's also the health, pieces of why I share, but like my real passion that I've come to learn is shifting people's perspectives to see what you can do that's not what other people are saying. Like you mentioned earlier about your coach was like, you can't take 4 college classes and this and that and you get straight A's. Like that's something that I've become to learn, is like people project their own insecurities and fears, sometimes out of love, sometimes out of bitterness, whatever it is. But
mm,
for us, that fueled us, because like that's my journey, being told I couldn't make a living out of BMX, something I loved. And that's what I did. And then now it's led me to these other passions and then connecting with people like yourself. So yeah, like, I mean, that was a super anxious filled, stress filled moment of my life, because I was like, this is what I want to do. But now I'm presented with this opportunity. I'm not good enough. And then I just did it. And then, yeah, here we are. And then actually you invited me back, another 2 times, I believe,
yeah.
week. And then, we obviously became friends and met some other people along the way. So I think those moments when we're scared in life, if we take a step back and ask ourselves, like, what is this moment for? And then for me, speaking, something that Dave Asprey actually said a while ago was like, if you're getting anxious or worried or scared about speaking, it's because you're making it about yourself. And so all I kept thinking about was like, why did I get asked to come speak? What is my message? And it
Yeah.
didn't alleviate all of the worry and the stress and all that, but it helped so much. And I guess alleviate's the wrong word. It didn't eliminate, but it helped me get to a point where I could push forward. And I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. And another thing that came to my mind after hearing all of that is, and it'd be my advice for anybody, that's a college student or high school student, is just really go for what you want and be very disciplined about that. Set rules for yourself, because I remember coming back from that internship, I did not like it. And then I started my junior year and said, I know I need a switch. I wrote down and said, I will not allow myself to go back into finance. So that at that career fair, even though I was still a finance major, I refused to talk to a single finance company. A few tried to talk to me, and I said respectfully, no, I'm not interested actually in finance roles. Talked to a bunch of companies in sales. And the reason that I knew I was interested in sales is I had mentioned it in one of my student organizations that I didn't like finance and I think sales would be right. And this girl, Elena Brown, she reached out to me and said, hey, like, we need to talk. I did this sales job that I loved and I really think you'd like it. Just hear me out. And so I talked to her about it, and it was with Proctor Gamble. It's the company I'm about to go work for now. And P&G, they sell a whole bunch of big brands like Gillette and Old Spice, Charmin, Bounty, Swiffer. So just a lot of common items you'd use. And so it didn't sound that flashy. I was like, toilet paper salesman, is that what I want to do? That's the most unflashy way I can describe it. But when she explained it to me and how you really get to help end consumers and make big decisions and change these stores that everybody interacts with weekly, at least, it sounded interesting. And after the other people I've talked to, other companies I talked to, I decided that's actually the only one I'm interested in. And most people would say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Well, that's what I did. I said, that's what I want, and I'm going to go for that. And I'm not going to accept anything else. And I remember my backup plan was, I was like, if I don't get it, I'll just take the summer off and I'll go up to Alaska, be a mountain bike instructor, and maybe start writing some personal training courses or something. I was like, that could happen. But I was like, it's one or the two. This is the one company I want to go work for, or I'll find something else. And I was very strict on that. I had an offer from another company, went through the whole interview process and had to say no. And I think that so many kids have the mindset of, they go to these career fairs where there's a bunch of companies there and so many students in line, and they say, man, I just want a job. I just hope somebody will give me a chance and give me a job. And I really think that's just the wrong way to go about it. You need to go for the job you want, because when you're in that interview with the company, let's say, it's not, I hope I impress them enough so that they will take me. It should be, I'm going to go be myself, and I hope they impress me enough to where that's the company I actually want to go work for. But so many people have the prior mindset and think that they just need something. Well, you need to put yourself in control and go after what you want. And then once you get something that you think you really like, you need to really analyze it, reflect, and figure out if it's what you enjoy. So I did an internship with Procter Gamble, really loved it. I'm about to start my full-time job, but I don't think it's a bad thing to say that, if there's a point where I feel like it's not for me, then you move to something else. Right now, it really feels like it's for me and I'm really excited about it. But that's why I'm a fan of reflecting, taking some time to, whether it's journal or just talk to somebody about it. You need to constantly analyze your spot and figure out if you're doing what you want to be doing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. And that's something I've experienced the last 3 years, retiring from BMX competition to what I'm doing today, speaking and coaching and, soon to be an author, something I never fathomed doing, which is really insane. But something you mentioned and alluded to is like this concept of being intentional with your decisions, especially when it comes to something you're going to do more hours a day, more days of the week than anything else. It's, and I find that a reason that people are so kind of conflicted or unsure or just like they don't feel confident in their decisions is because they're conditioned to believe they need to know what they want to do at a young age when you don't even know yourself. And I'm speaking
Yep.
as a 31-year-old learning about myself even more and more. And had it not been for these other experiences, I would have not known much about myself or known what I want to do in my life. And it led me to walking away from a childhood dream I manifested and lived to other things that I'm doing now that I'm passionate about. So I really, really appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like that stems from that switch you mentioned being turned on from bodybuilding and resistance training at a young age that shifted that mindset to where you started proving people wrong, because you were like, no, like I'm going to be intentional about what I want. I'm not going to, sacrifice my day to day for what people think I should be doing or because of the money. Because as we know, you can make just as much, if not more money, but with a passion. It's about your intention and not doing
Definitely.
something that's a projected fear from someone else. And so I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and that brings up another thought in my mind is I think the big metaphor in bodybuilding that is just so tangible is if I work hard, I will get results. And you see that week by week, month by month, easily. And that's what happened is I was like, whoa, I worked hard at something, took the time to learn about it, and I got the results I wanted. And so I remember the first time I actually had to do a big sales pitch was during my freshman year of college to my parents. And it was to pitch them to let me study abroad because it was going to cost a lot of money and I couldn't afford it. And I said, like, I put together this presentation and I said, Mom and Dad, here's what's going to happen. The business school at the University of Florida offers a study abroad program in London where they pair you up with a small company and you do an unpaid internship. You work for free. And I always said, but with that experience, I'm going to be able to come back to UF in my sophomore year, tell these other companies, hey, I just interned for a company in London. They're going to find that really cool. That experience will let me get a good internship my sophomore year summer. And I said, after having a good sophomore year and freshman year internship, I'll be able to have a good junior year internship, of which when I finish that internship, they should offer me a full-time job offer at the end of it. And I'll start my senior year with a job offer of something I'm really excited for. I laid that out to my parents. They finally agreed to let me study abroad. And I literally fulfilled that prophecy exactly how I laid it out. And that's just crazy. It's just, but if you have your mind on something, you lay out your goals, then you just see it. It's just, that was my vision. I saw it. That's what was going to happen. And I made it happen. And I think that's just sometimes how things work if you're committed to something.
No, 100%. Yeah, focus yields results, and so I've seen that work both ways in my life. Where I was focused on something I didn't want, that happened. Maybe not exactly how I pictured not wanting to happen, but injuries. When you
Mm,
focus on what happens if I don't do this trick correctly, or what happens in life when I don't do this or this doesn't work. If that's your focus, that's what you're gonna get. But if you flip it, I learned this actually. I became really clear about this years later, but going through the brain tumor diagnosis and surgery, my focus shifted away from what happens if I don't wake up, which is so easy to think. From surgery, at least, I was like, what happens when I do wake up? What am I going to do? Being intentional. But something also you mentioned earlier about being intentional with what you want in the moment, what feels right, and going after it, not having a backup plan, so to speak, with, I guess, a plan B, but just like, oh, worst case scenario, I could do this. That's still not bad. But something I've always been told until recently by my dad was like, yeah, just make sure you got a plan B. And I never felt good about that because I was like, that's taking the focus away from this plan A. And if I don't
mm,
want this to fail, like, why would I think about something else? But you mentioned having intentional focus around what feels right now. And that's a super important thing I've been learning more and more, to be, mindful of my intuition, my gut feeling, and not analyze things. But you also mentioned being open to change. And that's, I think, really important because a lot of times, myself included, I've thought like, if I go down this route, that's it forever. That's what we're taught in like school, like go to high
yeah.
school, go to, college, you're going to get this job. That's what you do forever. They don't talk about like transitioning, how to approach if you don't feel like this job is the right fit anymore, if you're passionate about something else. And I think that creates a lot of fear in people. But you've mentioned that, like, just be open. Like, for now, this job you've worked for, you laid it out, you accomplished it, you manifested it. It feels good. You're excited about it. But who knows? Like, you're 21. Like, who knows in
Yeah.
5, 10 years if a better opportunity that's you're more passionate about, or a new learning comes in, or if the company creates a new company and they want you to head up something, they like, being open-minded, I think, is key in life because it allows new information to come in. And I really appreciate you
Exactly.
mentioning that, because that's something that I try to get people to understand, especially at a young age. Is, to me, I was so driven for BMX and I wasn't really open to other things. I was just in that moment. And then wake up
Mm,
call after wake up call, injury, brain tumor diagnosis, all those things. It was like, oh, like maybe I should look at something else. And like, oh, I'm really fascinated by this. I had a lot of emotion attached to nutrition. So that's what sparked that. And then all these things, and it's come today where it's like, that's what I'm doing. But I never would have thought of that at 17 when I, dropped out of high school and moved 13 hours south to pursue BMX. And now it's like, oh, I get it. When like the older dudes are saying they're retiring, they're moving on, they get other, like, it makes sense now because we evolve. And
right.
I think that's something really important to think about, is going with how you feel, being smart about it, but like being intentional, but also being open to things changing down the road.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
So with all the things that we've just talked about today and like that you've experienced through your journey, which I'm going to say is a short amount of time, I have
Hmm.
10 years on you, and I still think where I'm at is still a short amount of time compared to where I want to be and people I look up to. What would you say,
Mm.
like, so far, like, what is the number one takeaway that you would share with someone, reflecting back on like your 15-year-old self, like just from what you've experienced and kind of compiled all this data, like what is the number one thing that you could, if you could put in like a word or a sentence or a paragraph, like what would that one thing be that you would love to share?
Um, I think the phrase would just be try a lot of things for at least the minimum needed amount of time. Meaning, like, I was a little bit resistant to bodybuilding for a bit, but it wasn't until I went 7 days in a row for 1 week that I had enough experience with that area to realize I really liked it. I think an internship's a great way to figure out if you like something, because it's only a 2 month commitment. But you're not going to figure out what you really like until you try things. Um, and that's something I always want to keep doing. I want to keep learning. I want to keep trying new things and figuring out what's the best. It's almost like saying, it reminds me of, you're not going to know what your favorite ice cream is unless you've tried all of them. So, I used to be only mint chocolate chip. I found out I like cookies and cream more. And now that's, after trying everything, that's what I go for. You never know if there's something better out there. And so it's like, don't settle. So try a bunch of things. You might find your favorite hobby ever. Um, and that's something that I hope to keep doing. In fact, I haven't set a timeline for it yet, but I'm trying to figure it out, because I think that we talked about earlier, my YouTube channel, what I do on it now is competitive eating. But I've been thinking about it, and some of the videos I found really cool lately are when people do sort of like 30-day experiments, because they're holding themselves accountable and they're trying something. So I tried going vegan for 30 days. I tried going keto for 30 days. I tried waking up at 4 a.m. for 30 days. And you document it, you try it. Maybe it's a habit that you end up loving. Maybe you try practicing a sport for 30 days. And that's the type of stuff that I think I want to start doing with my YouTube channel. Is, in a selfish way, it's going to help me learn more about myself and what I like. Hopefully then I can share my experiences with others. And I always try to look at these things and I'm like, you know what, if it helps one other person, then it's time well spent. And it's already helping me, so I think it's time well spent. We've talked about Gary Vee with each other before, but it'll be cool to have these sort of keepsake, like me documenting my experiences to then share with my kids and say, this is what I look like when I was your age. But I want to try a bunch of those things, because I've thought about keto a lot, but I can't speak about it because I've never tried it. Even veganism, I've heard a lot about it and a lot of people love it. I think that'd be interesting to try. So a whole bunch of these things, doing these sort of 30-day or 2 week experiments, I think would be really cool. And so that's why I think my big takeaway as a 21-year-old is to put yourself out there and just go for it. Say yes to a bunch of things to figure out what you like. The younger you can do it, the better, because you may find out something like weightlifting or fitness, whatever it might be, that could change your life. So that'd be my takeaway.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. I love it. And I believe in that. Like, I think I was fortunate enough, same with you, at a young age to have tried a lot of things. And then one thing clicked and it became a passion that led to other things. And I think if people are to try new things, and that's like the delayed gratification thing. Like right now, we're in a society where it's like everything's now. So people don't want
Mm,
to work for things. They don't want to try things. They don't want to take time to do things. And I find that myself still. Like, yeah, I'm learning that like I don't want to sit down and watch an hour-long YouTube video. Like I want to watch this. And like so like Rogan's podcast, I split that up into hour segments because it's 3 hours long.
yeah,
But
right.
I think if you can try more things, you're going to learn more about yourself, which is very important to getting to the next level of where you want to go, but also sharing with other people. Because to me, that's success is, doing things, learning, having your own wins, and then sharing with other people so they can win as well. And I think we talked about that like a year ago with your buddy when you were in that internship, talking about these different things you were thinking about. And it's cool to hear you talk about that again, because I think that'd be
Yeah.
amazing. And that actually sparks an interest in me, because what this podcast has been, I've been sharing on my own. I've been, chatting with other people that are, friends or just strangers, and just learning more about them. But it's to see what I can learn, and to share, but also
Mm,
to challenge myself to do something out of the norm for me. And so I look forward to seeing when you start doing that, and maybe I'll take some ideas and apply some of them on my own and see what I can do in terms of documenting via a podcast platform or something. So there's so many things, and if you just stay open, you're going to learn more about yourself and then be able to get to the next level.
definitely. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to doing that. I've talked about it a lot. I've thought about it for a while, and honestly, like years. I mean, sophomore year summer, I've thought about it, and then I kind of didn't do it. And then I finally learned how to edit some videos and put stuff on YouTube. And so I took that step. And so this is one thing that's taken a little longer to develop. I've been doing sort of experiments on my own, and I think the pieces are getting closer and closer to coming together. I've had my focus on really trying to get the job, focused on other things, focused on learning a lot. And I think I'm getting closer to the point where I'm ready to share these type of things. So I'm looking forward to that. And another thing you just mentioned about learning from others. Um, One of my favorite quotes is, I believe it's Ralph Waldo Emerson. It goes something along the lines of, in my walks, every man is my superior to me in some way. And in that, I learn from them. And I really love that. So it's like everybody you meet, there's something that they're better than you at, or something that they know more than you. You can always learn from somebody, no matter who they are, what their age is. And so I think that's really cool with what you're doing. You said, you're talking to anybody to learn from them, hear what they've experienced in their life. And I totally agree with that. I think that's a really cool thing to be doing. And I know it'll prove to be helpful and fun.
Yeah, like you said, like if I can learn something from someone else, with my past and my brain, how it works, it's just going to go through all my experiences, make connections that I never thought of, and then share that story with someone else. And it may help. Like me coming into that class 2 years ago, you had a massive takeaway, and like I'm really stoked on that, and I just want to do that more. So yeah, I look forward to seeing what comes from that on your end. And also, whenever this whole pandemic clears up, it'd be great to hang out. We're like 2 hours away from each other now, and
I know, it's crazy.
got to bring you out
Well,
to some food spots out there, and then see what you find as well.
yeah, definitely. I also, we've talked about it, but we've never trained together. So I think that'd be fun to get some workouts in and see some of the differences in our training styles. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what I can learn from you in that department.
Yeah, for sure. I also have another, almost like a question for you. I want to hear your take on it. We've talked a lot about intentionality and goal setting, in a way. We've sort of indirectly talked about goal setting. One of the habits that I've picked up in the last few months that I'm still playing around with, experimenting to figure out how to best use it. But a few months ago, started using, it's like Microsoft OneNote, but it's just a note taking application on my laptop. And in January, I set out goals for 2020. And then I have it broken down by months. And then each month I'll put goals for the month. At the end of the month, I'll do a little reflection. And then each week I have just some basic goals for the week. And then I'll outline before each day, what's the one thing I can do today that if I did nothing else, the day would feel like a win. It'd feel like a productive day. And I've been playing around with that. And then I'll do a reflection after the week. And that's sort of my journaling as I assess my goals and how it's sort of, I have my yearly goals and sort of my main things I'm hoping to accomplish. And so that's been my start to trying to put structure to my goal setting, like very like intentional, precise structure. Um, and I've been tweaking it here and there, and then it allows me to do reflections, what some people would call like journaling, and to look back and assess things like we've talked about. So that's what's kind of been working for me so far. How do you go about structuring your goals? Is it structured? Is it whatever just feels right? What's that look
It's
like for you?
interesting that format you mentioned reminds me of the book, The 12-Week Year, because they have a lot of that broken down and to like reflect and analyze and like at least commit to something for 12 weeks before you
Mm,
go and switch things. But for me right now, I've been in a challenge on a lot of different fronts. So I ended up hiring an NLP coach about a couple of months ago after hearing her speak at an event that I was speaking at. We connected and we've uncovered a lot of baggage that I've held on to. And one of them, pertaining to your question, was I was structuring the hell out of my days with trying to cram in as much education on business, on human health and nutrition, on this or that spirituality, like all these things. And like I was just getting a little overboard with the structure
mm,
that was coming from two things. This kind of resentment to my past and my career, where I was just, a free athlete, just train, party. Like that's all I did.
yeah.
And I was like, man, like I could have been so much better and I could have been healthier and I could have learned more at the time with all that free time I had. But that's not what I
Mm,
chose to do. So it doesn't really matter. But I learned the last few years that I've just been doing too much structuring, too much goal setting, too much analyzing. So I've been challenged. I
yeah.
have another week and a half to let go of all control around that and just
Okay.
be. And it's been really interesting because I've been learning a lot and I've been developing these habits based on like what feels good and what is productive, because I was finding that I had to be busy. I was doing these
Yeah.
things subconsciously because I was hiding insecurity of not knowing enough, not being good enough, or these things. And actually, it
Mm,
stemmed back from when I was 17 when I dropped out of high school, because the senior project was something that just, yeah, it had a lot of anxiety and fear around. I don't even remember what it was about because now it's like not a big deal. But at the
mm,
same time, that's when my mom allowed me to drop out of high school to move down to North Carolina for BMX. So I never addressed that fear of, my intelligence being challenged, which was an internal challenge. I created that. And now I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. So literally, I've been on an education and structure detox for the month.
okay. Nice.
That
Cool.
came from um, an insecurity that I didn't know enough. And so it was like really weird how that manifested. And so, yeah, I just been on this education detox because actually I had an addiction to knowledge because I didn't know enough. I didn't feel like I knew enough. So now I'm just kind of free spirited right now. And that's why I've been like, oh, I got to start a podcast. Like, that's cool. So it's like, it's allowed me to assess things differently and look at my being and my past and where I want to go with more clarity, but like less judgment and more grace. And so in that,
Okay.
I've been creating, these goals of mine, but I've been getting like really dialed in on why I was doing all this. Like I had a big whiteboard, literally had like my daily tasks, and then that broken
Mm,
down to personal and business. And then I had a weekly and then a monthly. So those are the things I do
mm,
each month as my goals. I have like a main goal and then all the reasons why, but then I put like action items as goals for daily, weekly,
okay.
monthly. And that's what I was running off of. And then I was just like structuring these days that were like really impossible because I
Mm,
was like, I work for myself, so I don't have anyone governing me. So I need to do that. I need this to hold me accountable. And like, and it just was creating so much stress. And my main objective in life is to create freedom. Like I want to feel
yeah.
free from time, free from money, free from like what I've been doing. But then that's been changing to creating this constraint around my days. So that way I
Mm,
don't go back to where I thought I was, which is like this weird, deep psychological thing I've been working through. It's been great. So with that being said, right now my goal is to just experience freedom. It's to not slack on my business. It's not to slack on my clients or doing things like this, speaking my truth, writing my book, which the whole COVID situation, it allowed me to not travel every week. Like I was on a plane like last 8 months before March, every other week. So I finished the rough draft of my book back in March. So now I'm working on editing it.
oh, awesome.
Things like that. Thanks. It's been a while in the making, but I don't know where I'm going to go in terms of, I think July 6th is my month. So it's been no
Mm,
books of any kind, no
okay.
podcasts, no educational YouTube videos, and no structuring my days, scheduling calls, things like that. That's different, but no like time blocking 12 hours in my day like I was doing before. And
Yeah.
so I have a specific financial goal I'm working towards. And I have all that laid out as to what, like, why, what I want to do with it, from myself personally, my family, charity, all these things. And why do I want that? And like what that feels like, what that looks like. So I've kind of just surrendered to just the unknown path of making that happen. And when July 6th comes, I think I have a better understanding of how I design my days, and it'll probably be more forgiving.
That's great. I loved hearing everything you just said there because I feel like a lot of people that have mindsets similar to you and I, where we want to always perform at a high level, we can get caught in the almost the way of working too hard or putting like too many restrictions on. And I've been there several times. I feel like I love reading, I love learning. I'll watch these like informational YouTube videos, but then it gets to these points where I'm like so caught up in that I've almost been taking in too much of the self-help stuff that I need to think on my own, and then I'll take a step back. And I love it because like you're always going to be constantly tweaking. So there's times where like in February, like even like my junior year of high school, I thought I had it all figured out, and then you look back and you're like, nope, like it's never going to be like that. And you could do that like month by month. Um, yeah, so that's really cool to hear, like how you're thinking about that. Back in, I want to say it was maybe it was February actually, but I did an experiment where I did a 7-day screen fast. So no laptop, no phone, no TV. So my laptop and phone get locked into my roommate's safe. I finished all my schoolwork a week in advance, like found the perfect time to be able to do 7 weeks or 7 days, like no technology, no screens. So if the TV was on in the living room, I just like go back into my room and just like read a book or something or go exercise. Um, and I didn't really know what was going to come out of that. I just knew I wanted to sort of take a break from media and all this information that was just like constantly coming at me digitally. And I think my big takeaway after that was how much I love being around people. Uh, I think technology is great in so many ways. It was actually a little frustrating that I wasn't able to use my phone to contact somebody to either speak to them or go hang out with them in person. Uh, I was on the street and I thought it was weird because I was walking to class and I had to ask this guy. I was like, "Hey, like, what time is it?" And I was like, "Well, like the last time I ever had to do that was probably like 10 years ago before like or even longer before I had a phone." Um, but my conversations I had with friends, conversations at dinner were so much better because it was never interrupted. Focus was never shifted by a notification or something on my phone. So I realized there's a ton of good with technology and screens and stuff. There's also some bad, but that was an interesting experiment to do because I feel like I don't know if I'll have a chance to do that again, to be able to fully disconnect like that. Uh, and it was great. I'm glad I did it. It was very interesting.
Yeah, no, it does sound interesting. I wonder how that would go. I got to do that. But I've at least made strides to where my phone is always on silent.
Mm,
Notifications, I have certain ones for like my email, but like other than that, no social media notifications. And I've been getting better about catching myself if I'm going on social media or something just to be. Because obviously I have a lot of my business attached to it. So,
right.
but yeah, that'd be interesting to pick like a week and just not do any of that. Just face-to-face
Yeah.
interaction, books, being outside more. And that's all these things I've been trying to be more conscious of and doing them more. But I wonder if it was just like you had no TV, you had no laptop, you had no phone for a week and just see what you do. That'd be interesting too to like plan a trip, like
Oh
to go
yeah, that'd be
somewhere
cool.
and just do something different.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so much. It's just such a weird time because I mean, not too long ago, everybody did that forever. Like it
Yep.
was just life, and now it's like, whoa, like all my friends they're like wait, but like, what if an emergency happens? I'm like, they don't. Like, what if all this stuff's gonna happen? I'm like, it won't. Like, I know it will. Nobody depends on me. I'm like, I'm a 21-year-old kid. Like, nobody's gonna catch on fire because I'm not on my phone. And I came back to my phone. I want to say it was like 526 text messages, a few missed calls, bunch of emails. Not one thing was important, like important enough to where it couldn't be fixed.
Yeah.
Uh, Granted, like I was a college student and had less people relying on me, but it was good to see that and realize like, okay, I can put my phone away. I can go to a dinner with friends and just leave my phone at home. Things like that. That's like kind of what I was hoping for. So it was good to experience. Definitely strange though. I noticed I had all these nervous tics for like reaching my pocket to find my phone. If I was like in an elevator, because like that's what you do is you just fill all this time, and then you end up listening to your own thoughts a lot more, which is weird because like you like 4x like the time of hearing your own talk for the days instead of just filling the voids. But that's kind of like the idea I was saying about like potentially a route for my YouTube channel and what I want to focus on. It's
That'd be a
just
good
trying
challenge.
things like that.
Yeah,
Like
that'd be a really phenomenal challenge because I would imagine the camera wouldn't be a screen, depending on how technical you want to get with a challenge, but it'd be just
right.
documenting. Because I feel like if you didn't document every day, there'd be so many things you'd miss. Because like you said, your thoughts were 4x in terms of like being conscious what you're thinking of. I feel like there'd be so much information you want to get out, or like voice record or something. I think that'd be really fascinating, and that could be something really interesting to challenge other people to do, even just like 3 days or even just 24 hours. Like just start small, like do one day where you don't. And I need to do that actually. I need to pick one of these weeks. So that's the beauty of working for myself. I think Thursday, I don't have anything scheduled yet. So I can go time block all that out. And then from Wednesday night to Thursday night, not touch my phone, look at the screen or anything like that. That'd be cool. I'll have to figure that out. I'll let you know how it goes.
Cool concept. I remember doing an Instagram poll and I said, and it's just the weirdest thing to me because the idea came to my mind like one night. And so I put this Instagram poll out there and it said, which one would be harder to do? 24 hours without food or 24 hours without your phone? And I think like 40 to 45% of people said 24 hours without my phone would be harder than 24 hours without food.
It's fascinating because when people talk about fasting, they're like, oh, it's so hard, but like take your phone away, which does nothing for your human health or life. It's like, I can't.
So I thought that's sort of where I first got inspired for the idea of like the screen fast. But yeah, those are the experiments. Like, I love that type of stuff. You try something, you learn something, you leave with the takeaway, you have a fun story to tell people. And so that's why I think that's the type of stuff I'd love to like document on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. That could be entertaining as well. Like it could be educational and entertaining, and just like you said, accountability for yourself to do something challenging, to see what comes from it. There's always going to be a takeaway from challenging yourself. So yeah. And let me know when you start doing that. And if there's a way I can get in on some of those and just like, we can have like comparing, contrasting experiences. I think that'd be cool too.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't said anything in stone, but the idea I think is I start my job in July, and once I feel settled, I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself, but feel settled. I need to not put too much pressure on myself, but I got to do it. Cause I like every time I take a shower, I think about it. I'm like, man, I got to do it. Or otherwise I'm just going to regret it. So I got to do it. I'll find a time, keep you updated, but it's almost like it's sat in my head for too long. So I just need to like start.
The cold showers?
Something you've always talked about. I've done that before. That summer I did 30 days of cold showers.
So what is it then? I think I missed it.
Just like actually posting on YouTube is what I'm saying.
Oh, posting. Like, yeah. Okay. You were talking about
the showers. I just need to like commit to that.
Yeah. It's funny because when you do pick that moment, you see your priorities in your day and how you think shift. And then you're like, got to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So looking forward to that. That'll kind of be like another cool hobby to pick up. It's literally learning how to film and edit. And I think that's really cool. And it's another challenge in itself. So.
For sure. Well, that sounds good. Well, I appreciate you. I want to respect your time. And I know Well, I guess maybe not for you right now, but it's a busy Monday. So, but yeah, you got,
Yeah, all
what's
that's
today? Like
left
the
is an
20,
allergy test today.
22nd. Oh, there you go. Nice. Well, 9 days till you start.
Uh, yeah, I guess so. That's it's like it's weird to think about. It's gonna be like, all right, you're officially an adult now, kind of deal. Um, but yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me to do this today. It's the first time doing something like this, and I like how you structure. You're like, yeah, it's just a conversation. Like we're just gonna talk,
That's
and
all it
all
is.
the different routes we went. Yeah, were super cool, and uh, hopefully on the 26th they open up gyms, and I'll be able to take a weekend trip up to. You're in Durham, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so hopefully I'll be able to take a
vice
trip
versa.
there.
Yeah.
We
We'll
can
have
get
to
some
make some
workouts
trips.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I got
definitely.
Jackie's got some family friends that live out in the Charlotte area, so we were trying to do a trip before the whole COVID thing kind of happened. So yeah, you'll have to come out here. We can show you some of our favorite spots around here, and yeah, it'll be good. Show you the area.
Heck yeah, awesome.
All right,
Well, I'm
Ben.
looking
Well,
forward to it.
sounds good. Yeah, me too, man. Well, I appreciate you. Have a good day, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome, sounds good, Josh.
All right,
See you later.
later.